help you every day and in pretty much whatever job you end up in or ministry you end up in is being a good storyteller. You probably know somebody who's just naturally a good storyteller, and as soon as they start telling a story, you're like, oh, I'm in. But for a lot of us, it doesn't come naturally. It's okay. It's a skill that you can actually learn. There are components to it, just like doing a skit, just like being on stage. Some people are just naturally dramatic, and other people learn. And the best combination is if you're naturally good at it and you have the skills to it. Kind of like piano. Some people can play by ear. Some people learn by music. If you can do both, yeah. So today you're going to learn the skills that go with pieces of a great story. So first of all, though, I'm going to tell you a story. So everybody needs to sit with at least one space in between. So find a spot and find something hard to put your paper on. Yes? I do. Here, Hopi, you're in charge of pens for whoever needs them. Okay, so when I was in Bangladesh, a long time ago, we had to go to this place that required a train ride. Now, trains in Bangladesh are not like trains here. I don't know if you've ever seen the pictures from like India, where there are people in the trains, people hanging out of the trains, people sitting on top of the trains, sometimes falling off of the trains. Millions of people. Bangladesh is one of the tiniest countries. It's like about the size of the state of Georgia, but there are 133 million people who live there. So just imagine, like the day before Christmas at the store shopping, it's like that all the time. So we needed to get on the train. The train station is chock full of people. We are running late. There's me, there's a few other adults, and there's some kids. We've got our luggage. Then we get there, and this coolie, which is the guys who help you with your luggage, he's like, must hurry, train is leaving. So we're like, oh my goodness. So we're trying to rush through this thing, through these people, blah, 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 blah. And he's getting our bags, and he's like, la, 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 and he throws them onto the train, and we throw ourselves onto the train. And we get there before it starts slowly taking off. And it's like, oh, we made it. And then we hear, wrong train! So we have to throw our stuff back off the train and jump off the train. Okay, so if I was telling that story, or if I have that story in my memory bank, what is a life lesson that I could take from that story so that I could use it? Say I'm a youth pastor or a youth pastor's wife, and I'm like, I really think there's something in that story that I could use to give a lesson to kids. Any ideas?
Don't rush into things before you know what's going on.
Okay. Make sure you're on the right train. Trust the right people. Ooh. Nice. Good. If you are a good storyteller, for one, it makes you more entertaining of a person to be around. But for another, especially like if you're in ministry, if you think of a pastor or a college professor or a youth pastor or a youth pastor's wife or whatever, somebody who's in ministry and they're up here talking for an hour and they're giving you instruction from the scriptures, that's great. They get to the story of David and Goliath, one of the most exciting stories in the whole Bible. And they start reading. And then they're like, okay, so David was a shepherd, and he went to the brook, and he picked 5 stones and put them in his pocket. And Goliath was yelling and saying bad things. And David decided to go and fight him, and it was very exciting. Are you excited?
Nope.
I'm not excited. He's probably not even excited. It's like, if you learn to be a good storyteller, you can set up this story and you can pull everybody into it. And it's like, okay, so here's David. He's 17 years old. He's going out to visit his brothers. His brothers think he's the annoying little kid in the family. They don't want him there. But he hears this guy. This guy is like humongous, and the guy's yelling all these horrible things about God, and it's just awful. And David's like, why isn't anybody out fighting this guy? The soldiers are hiding. What's up with that? Is there not a cause, he says? And they're like, well, he's been doing this for 40 days, and we're scared out of our mind, and nobody can go fight him because he's so huge. And David's like, I'll do it. Wait, what? You can totally set this up, and you can make it amazing, and you can put yourself in the place of this guy, and then you put yourself in the place of this guy, and you've got, he said this, and he said this, and now you're acting out the whole scene, and everybody's in on it. You can do that when you're telling your own stories. Now, if you're standing in a group of 5 people, that gets a little bit weird if you're like, and then I went over here and said this, and then I went over here and said this. But you can do that with your words. You can do it with your gestures. You can do it with your face. So today you're going to learn to be a great storyteller by learning to put the pieces together. You have a paper. Here we go. What I want you to do is close your eyes for a second. I want you to think of a story yourself. It can be something that has happened to you. It can be something funny. You embarrassed yourself. It could be something important. You learned a really good lesson. It can even be a fake story. You can make it up if you really feel like it. So think about a story. If you've got it, you can look at me. Okay, if you don't have it yet, you can sort of try and get there. For the moment, though, just think about the story of like when you were born, some story from the Bible. Just pick something. We're going to go through the components of this, and later on, you can keep thinking about it, and if something comes to your mind, you can be like, ooh, that's the one. Okay, so with the story that you have, or if you don't have a story, pick a Bible story, we are going to go through these pieces and parts to making it interesting and making it pull your audience in so they're interested in your story instead of just, hey, the other day this thing happened to me and wow, it was so cool. I don't know if you've ever talked to somebody like that before, but they're like, so everybody's around standing in a circle talking. They're like, oh, that reminds me of this time. Wow, I embarrassed myself so much. I mean, I was just so embarrassed. You just wouldn't believe how embarrassed I was. And I was chewing gum, and it was the time to stop chewing gum. And so I didn't know what to do with my gum. And you're just like, what are you talking about? But it was really embarrassing. The end. Thanks for that. That was great. No. First thing you do, look at your paper. You want, first of all, to introduce your story by giving people a setting. Where were you? Kind of what time frame are we talking about? So give them something to put in their head of what's going on and where you're at. So for example, when I was in 3rd grade during recess, what do you picture? What's in your head now? Playground. Little kid. So you're visualizing this little kid on the playground. Now if I started this story without telling you that, and then I'm like, I tripped and broke my 2 front teeth or something like that. You're like, oh my word. Oh, but I was in 3rd grade. It's okay. You messed it all up. You want to set it up first so that somebody can visualize something. Even if you're up on stage here, like say you're giving a presentation, if you don't visualize, give them a setting, you're the setting. So they're still just staring at you, waiting for you to give them something in their head. If you give them a setting, now they can picture it, and now they're watching the scene happen, or they're even feeling like they're in it. So, think about it with your story. What is your setting for your story? How old were you? Where were you? Give me some kind of setting. So write it down. There's space underneath your first thing. What is your setting for your story? Next, once you've got your setting, so think about it. Long, long ago in a galaxy far away, they just gave you your setting. Once upon a time in a land full of fairies. So now you're not on the playground in 3rd grade anymore. Doesn't have to be long. Okay. Next thing you're going to introduce is an action happening. So long, long ago in a galaxy far away, what's happening? Who's doing something? What else? What are you doing in this? So I was swinging when this little kid walked up to the swing set. So now the person can visualize where I am and some of what's happening. Add some thoughts to it. So this is happening and this is happening. Tell them what's going on in your head about that point. So it's like, and I thought, oh no, that little kid's gonna walk right in front of my swing. I can add to it later. But then, so you've got what was in your head, but then kind of like, how did you feel about it? So you're introducing where you are, you're introducing what happens, and then like what you're thinking about it, but now put some feelings in there. So don't just say how you felt. That's when you're writing a story, when you're acting a story, when you're telling a story. Showing is better than telling. Almost always. So, for example, somebody says, I was scared. Meh. So you're like, okay, you were scared, but I'm not in it. I'm not involved in this at all. But if you're up there telling somebody, I was shaking, my heart was pounding so bad, I started sweating, my palms started sweating. So in this story, you can be like, I was so scared I was going to kick this poor kid's teeth out if they ran in front of my swing. And so I grabbed the chains, but my hands were slippery because I was so nervous. Now somebody's in your story and they're like, ooh, what's going to happen? So add some feelings. At this point, people are into it. It's like, what's happening? But to add even more interest to it, add some words. Who is saying what? Now, at this point, I want everybody to pause, freeze, and we're going to add a little tiny category to the bottom. I wrote mine right here. It's the thou shalt nots. So you can write do not and underline it. And this is our first spot for a do not. One thing you do not want to do in a good story is you can write down, read the script, or he said, she said. I have a very, very good friend who, when they tell a story about what happened, they went to Walmart and they got up to the cashier. And I said, hey, how are you doing? And the cashier said, I'm doing pretty good. How are you? And then I said, well, I couldn't find that one thing. And then she said, oh, I thought it was on aisle 7. And then I said, seriously, I said, then she said, and I said, and she said, and they give me the whole script. And it's like, does any of this have to do with the story? But the story is like 30 lines down the script. You don't need to say everything that everybody said. Can you say the important things that were said? Kind of like in a play, or if you're reading a book. If you're reading a book, they don't tell you everything that happened. And then they were like, I got to go to the bathroom. And then they went to the bathroom. And then they came back and said, how are you feeling today? And I said, I'm feeling pretty good, but blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I got to go brush my teeth. Okay, I'll go brush my teeth. It's still boring. Real life gets boring. There's boring stuff in it. So pick the good stuff, what matters. So dialogue, who said what? So I yelled, stay back, kid. But she wasn't listening to me. So I yelled it later, louder, stay back, kid. So now you're actually kind of acting out the story a little bit. So you're saying the dialogue as if you're saying it right then, and again, it pulls your audience into your story. Now they're with you. So write down, did anybody say anything in your story about this point? Okay. Now, before we get to the last two things, we're going to add to the do not list. Thou shalt not. If you want to be an interesting and exciting storyteller, there are some things you don't want to do. Next thing is, don't mumble or talk a food in your mouth. Ugh. The more interesting your story is, the more people want to focus on you while you're telling it. And if you've got broccoli going nyang, 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 they don't want to focus on you. And if you mumble, they can't understand you. So then it's like, what'd you say? What'd you say? What'd you say? And that's like speed bumps in a story. If you have to stop and go back and say the same thing over again, you just lose all your momentum and your fun. Okay, next, do nots. Do not lie. And that sounds funny, but sometimes you're in the middle of the story and everybody's all into it, and you want to just kind of add some stuff to it to make it more exciting. So like we were on the train, and it starts pulling out, and the guy's like, wrong train, wrong train. So we had to throw our stuff off the train while it's moving, which I think it actually was, but I don't remember. And we had to jump off the train, and one of the kids got left behind, and he had to jump out the window. We could make it really exciting, and it'd be an exciting story, but it wouldn't be the truth. So if you're making up a story and everybody knows it, that's fine, go all out. But if it's a true story, keep it true. The next thing is, don't interrupt with your story. Which is very hard to do. So everybody's talking in a circle, and it makes you think of something, and you were like, oh, that reminds me. So somebody's telling their story, and you're like, oh, that reminds me when I was in 10th grade, and I was wearing this beautiful princess dress for this thing, and I fell down the stairs, which I did, and it was embarrassing. Maybe I'll tell you about that sometime. But it is, if I interrupt and jump over somebody else's story, that's just rude, and now they don't really want to listen to it because I just killed theirs. You want people to listen when you're telling a story, so listen when other people are first. And just hang on to it and wait until they breathe, and then you can jump in with yours. Okay, last do not. And this is one I hear from a lot of people. Don't get stuck in the details. Some people say that, don't get stuck in the weeds. I don't know if you've ever been sitting with some older couple and they're going to tell you this really cool, or maybe you're like, how did you meet? Or, why did you move here or something? And they're like, oh, back in, it was 88, we were living in such and such and so, and then we found out such and so, and then in 89 we moved to such and so, and the other guy's like, no, actually it wasn't in 89, it wasn't until 1990 that happened. Well, in 89 this happened, well in 1990 this happened, and they go on for about 10 or 15 minutes trying to figure out the exact date for the story that you don't even know what the story is at this point, and you're just sitting there because the details aren't important to the story, but they got stuck. And until they can figure out the detail, they can't move on with their story. And everybody's just sitting there like, twiddle thumbs. If it's a detail that isn't pertinent to the story, just skip it. So you're like, okay, it was in 89 and I think it was. I'm not sure. Anyway, move on. Move on. I actually know somebody who at this point recognizes that they do that. And they'll be like, unnecessary detail, and then they'll jump. And it's hard for a detail person to do that because they're like, can't move on until I fix this problem. But just tell yourself it's not a problem, it's just unnecessary. You're gonna put this in a box over here, and then we're gonna keep going. Woo! Okay, so those are the do nots. Now get back to your paper, the middle part, the finale. How did your story end? So I dragged my feet as hard as I could to stop the ground, to get the ground to stop my swing, but my foot caught. And the next thing I knew, I was flying out of my swing, but my foot was still caught in the ground, and I face planted hard. And when I looked up, spitting dirt out of my mouth, the little girl was standing there laughing so hard she was crying. I came to watch you, she said. You did the exact same thing last week. So the grand finale, did something actually happen to finish your story, or are you just rambling for no reason? Last thing, if pertinent. Now, if it's a funny story and you get to the end and it's the funny story, yay. But if it's a story like with a lesson in it, it's kind of like, so I learned blah, 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 or, the punchline to the joke. When you get to the end, what was the whole point to wrap it all up? So that day I learned, sometimes you think you're being a hero rescuing a kid, turns out she's just there for your comedy routine. So that kind of closes it all up. Or like the lesson with the train. If I can be like, well, and it just goes to show you, no matter how hard you run and stress yourself out, doesn't make any difference if you get on the wrong train. Which could be a good life lesson. So is there a point to your story? Go ahead and write. So now you have the building blocks for a great story, but of course, this isn't writing class, fun as that would be. This is drama class. So it doesn't really finish up until you have expressed it dramatically, or at least expressed it. So what we are doing next is I'm going to put you into groups of 2 or 3. You are going to take your story, and you're going to go off in a little group, and you're each going to tell the story to your group. And it's a good way to practice it. And the others in your group, very nicely, can tell you if there are extra things that didn't really need to be in there, or they can ask questions like, wait a minute, you